Good afternoon, Little Rock. The Brad Schmidt Show. I've been practicing that again. The Schmidt Show. Could really screw that up if you're not careful. Nic Horton. This is not Brad Schmidt, in case you're wondering. Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Brad. Excited to be back. This is my second time now in this seat. Been on the other side of the table a few times. And always enjoy coming on the show. I learned last time very quickly, I think by the time I sat down and opened the screen here, we had 10, 15, 20 text messages. So I know this is a very active and engaged audience. So the show is y'all's today. I mean, I've got some things certainly that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about the Olympics. We have some actual breaking news here. I've been told by producer Tom that Team USA and the women's gymnastics team just took gold in Paris. So very exciting development. And if you're like me, you just can't get enough of the Olympic Games. Now, I know where your head's going when I say that, and we're going to talk about it, the elephant in the room with the opening ceremonies. Trust me when I say I am just as upset as you are, maybe more. But I don't know. I mean, I love the Olympics. I always look forward to it. And getting to experience it in a totally different way this year, watching it with my kids. You know, I shared with some folks the other day, my daughter was a month and a half old during the Japan Olympics 4 years ago. And now she's 4 and a month and a half, I suppose, 4 and a month. And she is just mesmerized watching the women's sports, gymnastics in particular. And sorry for the spoiler alert, or the lack of spoiler alert, I should say. If you're filming the Olympics and you didn't want to know, cover your ears, I'm sorry. But it sounds like the women have taken gold, which is really, really exciting. And go USA. I mean, there's something about the Olympics. It just gets your blood pumping. But if you're like me and you watch that opening ceremony, it also probably got your blood boiling in addition to pumping. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. If you have thoughts, you can call in or text. I'm sure you do. And I'm sure Brad talked about this yesterday. I didn't get a chance to listen, unfortunately. But as a believer, as an American, as someone who just believes in common decency, I mean, what a disgrace. What a disgrace. I don't know what else to say. And I think it's taken, at least me, several days to really process and figure out how I feel about what happened beyond just the initial outrage of it. And we're going to talk more about that throughout the show here today, certainly. But if you have thoughts and you want to be a part of the show, we've got no guests this hour except for you all. So call in, text in at 501-403-KARN. That's 501-403-5276. And we'll put you on the show. Hey, whatever you want to talk about for this first hour, whatever you guys want to discuss. I want to hear your thoughts on the opening ceremonies. And beyond the opening ceremonies themselves, I want to know, does it spoil the rest of the Olympics for you? Because that's what I spent a lot of the weekend really wrestling with, because I love the Olympics so much, and the national pride, and just the competition, and the sports that you just don't always get to see. Right? You can't just flip on the TV and watch women's gymnastics or rugby or badminton. Watched some badminton the other night. Surfing, skateboarding, yep. Breakdance. Or they added a couple sports this year too. Breakdancing was one. Yeah, there was another one someone was telling me, and I was like, I can't believe that's even a sport. But I don't know. I've just decided not to let the opening ceremonies ruin the rest of the experience. Now, if that mentality and that rot starts seeping into the games themselves, or the rest of the event, that may have to change. And again, I think part of the problem here too is just that the left has jammed this cancel culture mentality so far down our throats that I feel this tension of I don't want to be that way, right? Like, I don't want to become what they are and just say, well, because this was so egregious and offensive and disgusting, which it was, that I'm going to just take it out on, I'm going to punish myself and my kids and, frankly, the athletes and the kids that have been training for this event for years and years and years that have finally gotten a chance to compete on the world stage. Are we not going to support them now because a bunch of French people did something stupid? I mean, if that's the test, and again, I'm not minimizing it at all. I told someone yesterday, I was doing radio today, that we were going to talk about this, and I said, I'm probably going to just make everyone mad. I tend to be pretty good at that, right? Like, I do see both sides of some of these things. I'm with you if you are ticked, because I'm ticked. And I think it was completely inappropriate and egregious. And what's even more, honestly, it's almost become laughable now, is the amount of time and energy that they spent over the weekend trying to explain it away and justifying it. And now they're saying, well, now, it wasn't really the Last Supper. It wasn't actually the Last Supper. It was really this, scene out of Greek mythology or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a Greek mythology expert. Never really studied it. Never really had an interest. But what I do know is that millions and millions and millions of people across the world saw it and immediately thought of the Last Supper. So in some ways, I want to say, it's almost irrelevant what the intention was, because the perception is reality, right? And when I see it, I can only think of one other time in recent history where my phone has blown up as much as it did on Friday night during the opening ceremonies. And it was 2 weeks ago when President Trump was shot. But those are very rare occurrences where my phone just that much from that many people in that short amount of time, because so many people saw it and so many people knew what it was. And now they're just gaslighting us, and they're just trying to pretend and rewrite history because the backlash has been so strong. Well, it was this Greek thing, and then I'm on Twitter yesterday, just my blood is just boiling from all these people saying, these stupid Christians, they don't understand. These hicks from the South that marry their sisters and don't wear shoes, and they think everything's, and they're so self-centered. There was all this narrative out there about they're so self-centered. They think everything's about them. Well, guess what? There were millions of non-Christians that saw it and had the same reaction that we did. Now, they may not have been offended in the same way, but they knew when they saw it what it was. Elon Musk, I think he's the richest person in the world now. He saw it and had some thoughts that he shared on Twitter about how offensive it was. I don't think he's a believer. I hope he is. But even he saw it and recognized it for what it was. Now, what's interesting, too, is we study the pictures. There's all these pictures now coming out. Oh, look at this Greek mythology. Look at this scene. It really looks more like this than it does the Last Supper. But I have yet to see, now I'm not an expert, but I've seen a lot of these pictures from media and all these other folks that call themselves Greek mythology experts now, all of a sudden. And they have all these pictures, and yeah, it looks similar. I don't think it looks any more similar than it does to the Last Supper. But what I have not seen, and if you've seen it, text it. Text it in, 501-403-5276, and I'll tweet it. And I'll put it out there for the world. But I've not seen a single picture of that Greek mythology reference that they keep talking about, where the person in the center of the shot has a halo on. The only thing that you think of when you see that person in the center with the halo on is the Last Supper. I've not seen a single rendition of the Greek mythology scene, whatever it is, Dionysus or whatever his name is, that has a halo. And to me, that they can't overcome that. And why did the Olympics apologize? I mean, there's a lot of pieces of this that just don't make sense. So 501-403-5276, text or call if you have thoughts about the opening scene from the Olympics. I'm Nic Horton, filling in for Brad Schmidt. We got to go to a quick break. Stick around. We're just getting warmed up. This guy's got great intro music. Come on. Nic Horton, filling in for Brad Schmidt on the Schmidt Show. Excited to be back. We're talking about, well, what everybody's talking about, frankly, the opening ceremony of the Olympics. We've had several texts come in. Thank you guys. I knew y'all were going to engage on this in particular, but what an engaged audience y'all are. I really appreciate the feedback. Here's a thought from one listener. Text says, "That's the problem. They know we love the Olympics, so they slide in trans Last Suppers and other dumb things. We have to push back and not watch." We've got another text here that says, "Not the athlete's fault. It was a very disgusting opening ceremony." And that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, it was disgusting. We should be vocal. I mean, look, I'm on the largest conservative talk radio station in Arkansas today, letting you know it was unacceptable. It was revolting. It was a slap in the face to billions of people around the world that identify themselves as followers of Christ, including me and most people that I know and love and engage with that take their faith very seriously. So it was a huge problem. I just don't know. And this is the really frustrating thing about where we're at, frankly, as a culture. Because what do we do? Do we just give up things that we love because the left is rubbing their junk in our face? I mean, maybe a poor choice of words there, but if you've seen some of the pictures from the ceremony, you know what I'm talking about. And so as Christians, as believers, I mean, this is just something we're going to have to continue to wrestle with. And I think, again, it's totally appropriate and maybe even mandatory, frankly, that we speak up and say, this is unacceptable. But do we punish the athletes? Do we punish ourselves and our kids from enjoying this great tradition of the Olympics and cheering on our countrymen and women? I don't know. It's a tough thing, and unfortunately, again, the broader point, the more frustrating part of this is that we know this won't be the last time. I think they crossed a line here in a different way than what they've done before, at least in my lifetime. I mean, it was so clear, and it was so obvious, and it was so disgusting that maybe they'll learn from it a little bit. But look at Scripture. I mean, what does Scripture tell us? We're going to be mocked. We're going to be persecuted. We're going to be made fun of. That's part of this deal. I can handle it. And I think that's part of maturing in your faith and becoming a strong believer, that you can handle it. I mean, look at what they did to Jesus. Spat on him, whipped him, threw lots for his clothes. I mean, there is a cost to the gospel and following Christ, and he tells us that from the outset. That shouldn't be a surprise. And I think that's part of my reaction to all of this too. It's disgusting. We should be mad, but we also shouldn't be surprised. Because Jesus told us 2,000-ish, 20-ish years ago that we were going to have to endure this kind of stuff. But I do think we have a responsibility to speak out and condemn it. We got another text here from a listener. I was going to get to this at some point. I'm glad somebody brought this out. He said, interesting that they did not choose a Muslim theme to make fun of. Really interesting. Now, I can tell you why. I can tell you a lot of reasons why. But for those of you that have studied Islam at all, and I did, I took an entire class. I might get canceled for this, but I took an entire class in Muslim history in college at a Christian university because I wanted to understand what we're up against and this radical ideology that's out there. And if you've studied Islam at all or listened to this show or other conservative talk radio, you've probably heard this shared, but it's true that in the Muslim faith, in the Islamic faith, you can't even have a depiction of the Prophet Muhammad, or they'll cut your head off. I mean, they'll just straight up behead you. And this was it was 4 or 5 years ago. There was a big news story about this. I think it was a French newspaper. We should look this up. They printed some cartoon of Muhammad, and they all got death threats. And they ended up having to come out. It was this big French newspaper, I think it was. We'll look this up during the break. But they all got death threats, and they ended up apologizing, and we'll never do it again. Now, obviously, that should not be our reaction, right? But isn't it interesting? Oh yeah, this listener had Charlie Hebdo. What a memory! Wow, Charlie Hebdo. That was the occasion. We'll look that up and share some of that in the next segment. But why do they have more respect for the Islamic faith? I mean, again, you could argue it's because they don't want to be beheaded, which is understandable. Yeah. Well, you tend to need your head if you're gonna, be a part of this world. Yeah. But it's interesting that they didn't do that. It's interesting that they chose Christians. And that they decided to. Now, it is, again, we're going to talk about this, I think, a lot throughout the show today. But they want you to now believe that this didn't actually happen. You stupid Christians. You really think this was about you? I mean, it's some sort of weird combination of gaslighting and projection and revisionist history, denial. I mean, it's just this concoction of liberal garbage, frankly. But they want you to what's the I think it's a Marx Brothers reference. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? I mean, that's basically what this is. You can't actually think that was the Last Supper. I mean, yeah, they were all sitting at a table and they had halos on, but had nothing to do with Jesus, clearly. We're going to talk more. Be a part of the show, 501-403-KARN. We'll be back right after this. So this is a story, well, this is a retelling of a story of something that happened in 2015. The story itself is from September 2020, but here's the headline. Magazine republishes controversial Muhammad cartoons. And shout out to producer Tom over here behind the glass for finding this during the break. But here, this is it. And shout out to this listener who somehow remembered the name of this story. I vaguely recalled this happening. But here's what happened. A French satirical magazine, Charlie Hebdo, has republished cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad that made them the target of a deadly terror attack in 2015. Republication comes a day before 14 people go on trial accused of helping the two Islamist attackers carry out their gun rampage on the 7th of January 2015. So I guess I should correct the record and say it's not that the French would never do this to Muslims. It's, I guess, the fact that they did it and then 5 people died. 12 people were killed, including the cartoonist, and then 5 additional people, so 17 people in total, in a related attack in Paris, in the same city where they did this disgusting Last Supper display. And according to this BBC article, this was the inciting incident. These initial attacks triggered a wave of what they called jihadist strikes across the country of France. But again, I guess we can say they won't do it. They won't make fun of Islam again because they've already done it and they triggered, jihadist attacks all the way across the country. But I think the finer point here is they respect that religion and Buddhism and all of these other religions more than they respect Christianity. And that just seems indisputably true. They would have never done a display of that sort mocking the Buddhist faith, mocking the Sikh faith. They might have done it mocking Judaism. I wouldn't put that past them. But they did this for a reason, because they think we're all a big joke. And you can see that so clearly from the reaction. I mean, gaslighting is not quite strong enough of a word anymore. I don't like the L word, I don't like to say lying. It just seems lazy. Just, they're lying. But it's just so much worse than that. Again, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Don't look over here, look over there. That wasn't actually the Last Supper. It was this Greek mythology scene that you've never heard of. Why have you never heard of it? Oh, because you're a bunch of dumb hick Christians from America. And you're just so unrefined that you've never heard of this Greek mythology. Now, here's another thing. I was thinking about this morning. Let's say it wasn't, maybe it wasn't the Last Supper. I mean, I'm pretty confident it was. I think they're just completely fleecing us now because they've seen the backlash. And if it wasn't, by the way, if it wasn't the Last Supper, why did the Olympics come out and apologize to Christians? Because that happened this weekend. I think within 24 hours. And why, by the way, did the woman, or I guess I shouldn't use gender language, I don't know exactly, the person, the non-binary person that was wearing the halo came out and called herself the Olympic Jesus. Did you see this? God will not be mocked, producer Tom. And she called herself, they called themselves Olympic Jesus. Well, so if it's really this Greek mythology scene, why would you call yourself Olympic Jesus? Huh. It's kind of odd. Kind of a head scratcher. Yeah. Maybe saying the quiet part out loud. But let's just say for the sake of argument that it was this Greek mythological scene. And maybe it wasn't really the Last Supper. Or maybe they wanted you to think it was the Last Supper. But they wanted to give themselves just enough deniability so that they could say that it really wasn't. We talked about this in the first segment. Perception is reality, right? Millions and hundreds of millions of people saw it, and a huge number of them thought exactly what we thought, which is that it was the Last Supper. But even if it wasn't, and I'm not a Greek mythology expert, I really don't care. It's not interesting to me. I don't really care if that makes me uneducated. So go ahead and, get your laughs in about that. I really don't care at all. But isn't I don't know. I'm not the expert on this, but I think we should at least consider that even if it was Greek mythology, quote unquote, isn't that maybe not just as bad as mocking the Last Supper, but it's still mocking God. It's still doing this public display of all of these fake gods and honoring all of these fake gods. So that's probably not as bad as outright mocking the Savior of the world, right? But it's not much better. It's really not. So you're listening to the Schmidt Show, in case you're wondering, 102.9. This is not Brad Schmidt. This is a slightly less handsome version of Brad Schmidt. And by the way, before I forget, I should give you if you've been listening to KARN, you've heard about this contest that's going on. And it's your chance. I don't know if I can enter, but I'm going to try. We'll see. I'll have my wife enter. But it's your chance to see Billy Joel and Sting live in Las Vegas with NewsRadio 102.9 KARN. So if you want to enter the contest, really simple. All you have to do is text the keyword GOOD, GOOD, to 95819. And you'll be entered in a contest. I should tell you, standard messaging rates may apply. And also do not text and drive. Very important. Please, if you're driving, we will not be held liable for that. But full rules available at newsradio1029.com. But again, the keyword is good. This hour, it'll change starting in the 3 o'clock hour. But text the word good to 95819 for a chance to enter the contest. We got a couple more texts here. Thank you guys again for participating in this conversation, which I think is really, really important. We got a text from a listener here who says, I'm a lesbian and a conservative. And that was the most disgusting display I've ever seen. And I really appreciate that comment. I appreciate all these comments, but I really appreciate that one because I think it's so egregious to even folks who maybe don't have a problem with some of the lifestyle that they were promoting. But the fact that they're flipping the bird to Christians, it should offend you. It should offend non-Christians. What if it was your religion? I mean, is nothing sacred? Is nothing sacred anymore? We got to get another break in. Nic Horton filling in for Brad Schmidt. 102.9 KARN News Radio. We'll be right back. News Radio 102.9 KARN, the Schmidt Show. Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Brad Schmidt. Probably in the next hour, we'll talk a little bit more about Opportunity, Arkansas, who we are and what we're doing. Kind of just jumped right into it in the first hour. If you can't tell, I'm a little worked up about the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. I know it's hard to believe. If you want to sound off and call in, be a part of the show, we will get you in right away. 501-403-5276, 501-403-5276. You can also text. Got a couple more texts here in the break here from a listener who says, I guess the pale white horse wasn't a Christian reference either. I didn't even catch that part. That's a great observation. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it. I had to go back and watch. Now, I did see the golden calf, which we hadn't talked about yet. There was definitely a goal. I mean, it's like, and again, for them to try to come back and say, "Oh, this is a Greek mythology scene." Well, how do you explain all this other stuff? I mean, it wasn't just like that one scene. There's all of this imagery peppered throughout the entire thing, all pointing back to Christianity. It's not a mystery here. And again, I mean, maybe we shouldn't have spent the whole first hour on this, but We might spin another 2. We might. I got the microphone. What are they going to do? Kick me out? But we do, I think, have an obligation to call this out for what it is. And the incessant, aggressive gaslighting that is going on. And just, and not even, again, not even gaslighting as much as it's just telling us to all sit down and shut up and sit in the corner and quit making everything about us. Quit making everything about yourself, Nick. I mean, it's just too much. It's just too much. And I love the Olympics. They've got it on here in the studio, and I've had a hard time. Not just watching the screen. There's no telling how many hours of Olympic games I watched with my kids this weekend. Just really good, wholesome material and programming. And I think in a way that's what makes it so upsetting, because we all love the Olympics so much. You know, Rush used to talk about this all the time. The infusion of politics into everything. Sports, entertainment, business, everything. And I'm in politics in a way. I love politics. I love the sport of it, so to speak. But why can't we just watch a sporting event? Like, you can't. I think I'm about done with the NFL, because you can't watch a game without, this game presented to you by. Every 2 minutes, it's this month and it's that month, and it's just nonstop. Why can't we just enjoy a sporting event anymore? We've got a caller, Mark in England. Thanks for calling in and being part of the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Just the fact that in 1919 and then back in 1945 and the years prior, that a bunch of doggone Christians had to get together to go over there and save their butts from the Nazis. That's what.
Well, you make a strong point, my friend.
And cleaned up the mess. Well, tried to in Vietnam. Could have, but politics got in the way of that one. But anyway, we were there to help them out again in Vietnam after that. Yeah. But anyway, that's just a little reminder of what Christianity has done for the French. Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate the call, Mark. That's a really strong point. Of course, he's talking about D-Day and World War II and the sacrifice that Americans made to go and fight for the French and their way of life. And
now they're making fun of Christianity.
Now they're making fun of us.
And all those boys, all those young men were, a lot of them Christians and Jewish men that bled on the shores there and bled across their property, their land, to make them, to let them become free again and to practice what they have today. Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
God bless y'all.
Hey, I appreciate that, Mark, and thanks for calling. Thanks for listening and being part of the show. It's an important reminder. I mean, America, maybe even just take religion out of it for a minute, which I don't typically like to do, but put that aside. America as a country has shed a lot of blood and treasure for the French people. And the left obviously wants to spend a lot of time and energy convincing us we're not a Christian nation, separation of church and state. Show me where that is in the Constitution. You can't, because it's not in there. But we are a Christian nation. We were founded that way. Doesn't mean we're a Christian government, right? But we are a Christian country. That's our founding. That's our roots. And to Mark's point, this is how we get repaid. Remember that. I guess it's not funny. Shouldn't laugh, but that push a few years ago, it was like right around 9/11. The French were kind of, or maybe it was Iraq War. They didn't want to get involved. They just want to stay out of it. And there was kind of this big anti-French sentiment that popped up because of it. And, we, for a while, maybe it was just me and my friends, but there weren't French fries anymore, right? There wasn't French toast. It's freedom fries. Freedom toast. Maybe we need to go back to that. You know, put them in their place. Freedom fries. I still say that all the time. Tom said it right now. Again, some of this stuff is just laugh or cry, right? I mean, it's so pathetic and it's so revolting. And I know so many of us have spent a lot of time this weekend just irritated. And part of me wants to not even give them that satisfaction, right, of being upset about it. But as we've been talking about this hour, we have a duty to call it out. And so that's what we're doing here today. Nic Horton filling in for Brad Schmidt on the Schmidt Show. Hour 1 went really fast. Time flies when you're having fun, right, Tom? So next hour, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We'll talk some more about some national issues, but we're also going to talk about some state issues. We're going to be joined in studio by State Senator Ben Gilmore from District 21. One now. Redistricting. That's right. District 1. Way down there in L.A., Lower Arkansas. And we'll be visiting with him for about a half an hour coming back. So stick around. You won't want to miss it. You're listening to KARN News Radio. Stick around.
Great to be with you, Nick. First of all, let me just say, Opportunity Arkansas is a great organization that pushes a lot of great policy, and we're fortunate to have you and Opportunity Arkansas working in the state for the people, pushing a lot of things that I know that I care about, a lot of my colleagues care about, and certainly I think most Arkansans care about. So really appreciate the work that you're doing over there.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for coming in. That'll be all.
That was it?
Yeah,
Okay, I can leave.
That's all we needed.
easy.
Did we get it, Tom? Okay. Yeah, we're good. No, I appreciate that a lot. And look, I think we can certainly talk about this more throughout the time that we have here today. But the work that we do, I mean, as I tell people a lot when I'm out kind of on the stump, so to speak, talking to county committees and Kiwanis groups and others, we can have all the great ideas in the world, but I don't get to file legislation. Unfortunately, I mean, I tried once, and they wouldn't.
Might be a good thing,
they wouldn't let
but
me. And so the work, in all seriousness, the work that we do, coming up with ideas and researching generational problems and trying to come up with homegrown ideas and Arkansas specific ideas to these Arkansas specific problems, couldn't happen without you and your colleagues and certainly our great governor and folks that we have in state government. So the work that we do wouldn't be possible without y'all.
Well, it's a team sport for
it
sure.
Is.
So it takes all of us.
It is. And I think too that's really what's really exciting about where we are right now in Arkansas as a conservative movement, because we've been in a place for the last 4 or 5, 6 years where we had the bodies, right? We had the numbers, but there just wasn't the progress, there just wasn't the momentum. And it feels like, as someone who's on the outside, maybe a little bit closer than some, but mostly on the outside, it feels like we've started to turn a corner. And I've told people we're not just a Republican state anymore. We're now a conservative state, which is really, really exciting because it's something that, so many of us have spent a decade or more working towards. What are your thoughts? Do you feel that inside the building?
100%. I mean, look, here's what I would say. When I ran and beat a longtime incumbent Democrat, and I won by 60% in a district in a part of the state, southeast Arkansas, to be the first Republican to hold this seat. And when I won with 60% of the vote, what I told people, and I still firmly believe this, it was a mandate for conservatism. When that part of the state rises up and says, you know what, we want to go in a different direction. And I think we are finally catching a lot of that momentum in Arkansas. To your point, we've had a lot of great people pushing a lot of great policy for a lot of years, but we hadn't been that excited about it, and we hadn't gotten the momentum that we wanted. And I feel like we have the momentum now. I think a lot of credit goes to our governor and the great work that she's doing. She's pushed a lot of really tough policy, but policy that's going to make a difference in the lives of Arkansans. And so we're seeing that, and we're seeing Arkansans excited about that. And so we've got to keep up that momentum. And I think it's incumbent on us. It's great, to have folks like you in the position that you're in to help us keep that momentum. I like to tell folks that a lot of times we're like the dog that was chasing the car for years. We finally caught the car. We kicked everybody out, and now we're learning to drive the car.
That's my analogy.
Well, I mean, maybe I think you stole it from me. I think you stole it from me.
Well, so I agree with all that, and I think it's in our lifetimes, right, there's never been a more exciting time to be a conservative in Arkansas. Having said that, quote the great Larry David, having said that, there are some people who don't have that perspective. And I think that's natural in a way. Like, it's a growing pain of being a supermajority and just kind of where we are. The party's grown, right? The tent has grown. The movement's grown, which is mostly a good thing, I think. But some people now are just still frustrated. I mean, I'm not sure they know even why they're frustrated, but they're just frustrated. And they just want more and more and more. For me, as someone who got involved more than a decade ago, I mean, the rate of progress, just income tax cuts alone, right?
It's huge.
3 rounds of income tax cuts in the last 18 months.
So what are we at this point? $1.5 billion?
We're getting close to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think about.
Now one of the lowest in the region 100%, for the top income tax rate.
And I never thought we'd be here this quickly. And that, again, is a testament to a lot of hard work. But I want to sort of jump back to something you said, where we have a lot of folks that are frustrated. And I think they feel like that we're not making the strides that, frankly, they'd like to see. But here's what I'd say. We are a party with a big tent, and we have grown the party. We've brought a lot of people into it. And you know what? Not everybody can say, and this is not to brag on you or me or others, but
that's okay if you want to.
But you've been engaged in the fight for more than a decade. I've been engaged in the fight for more than a decade. And so we remember where we came from. We don't remember 2 years ago. We don't remember just the 21 session. We remember the times where the Democrats wouldn't even let us pick committees until all the committees had been picked, and they'd let the Republicans in the Senate come in after that point. So I remember those things, and it's a little frustrating because we got people who are brand new in the party. That's great. We're happy to have them, but they're only looking at a very small window of time going back maybe 2 years. And we got to understand we've made a lot of progress. And I don't say that to like we can sit back and rest. Not at all. It just means that we have a lot more to do, but more importantly, we're going to keep up the momentum, and we're going to do it smart with good policy.
So to that point, looking ahead, how do we keep our foot on the gas and keep the momentum going? I know there's maybe some things that are still, we're 4 or 5 months out from legislative session, but people are starting to think about session, right? What are we going to prioritize? Last session, I think you could say, was the education session. I like to call it the education and corrections reform.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kind of my thing.
And income tax. But what do you think are going to be the big ticket items, or what do you think should be the big ticket items going into January?
Well, always, every time I get the opportunity, when I'm asked that question, I always talk about spending. We have to rein in spending. We have to get spending under control in the state. Now, look, we're in a really great spot. You know this. We are very fortunate to be in the state that we're in, where we have balanced budgets, things that the federal government hasn't seen in decades, right? So not to get into off that, I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down. But we're fortunate in Arkansas. And so what we're going to have to continue to do, though, is watch our spending. You saw that we reduced spending in this last fiscal session. That's great. We got a lot more to do on that. And frankly, what we're going to have to do is get really serious about finding the fat in government that we can trim. Now, look, you got to be careful in doing that. You got to be smart about that. You got to realize that, sometimes there's programs that impact people's lives that exist. And so you have to look at that and sort of figure out, okay, how do we make these cuts, or how do we reduce this spending, or whatever it is, to make sure that, we're accounting for the unintended consequences. And so we got to be smart about that. But the bottom line is this: if we want to continue to see tax cuts like what we've done, if we want to continue to see programs like LEARNs go into effect, if we want to keep our streets safe and implement bills like the Protect Arkansas Act, which I was proud to sponsor, we've got to reduce spending, because you know what's going to happen? Spending's going up on issues like corrections, because we're building a new prison. Rightfully so. We should do that. It gets criminals off our streets. LEARNs is being implemented. We want that. We want more kids to have the opportunities that LEARNs affords them. But with that means that we have to prioritize programs and policy like that. So to keep doing that and to keep reducing the overall tax burden on Arkansans, we're going to have to get serious about stupid little wasteful programs that exist in state government. Now,
care to give any examples?
Well, I mean, look, let's just be really honest here. We could talk about Medicaid, and Medicaid exists to help the most vulnerable among us. Let's just be honest. But should we be helping as many people as we are that, frankly, I think are abusing the system in a lot of ways? No, I don't think we should. Our governor's been very, very focused on that, and so we've made a lot of great progress there. A bill that I passed in the last session, I think you probably remember it, was imposing work requirements on those that are getting housing assistance. Great bill. There's a lot of people that didn't like that. And you know what? The people who didn't like that were the people who were able-bodied working-age adults who were sitting at home when they could have been working a job. Now, I'm not saying that everybody falls into that category or that bucket, but let's just be really honest here. There's a lot of people that do. And so why should the taxpayers, the hardworking Arkansans, pay for someone like that?
All right, we got to get in a break. Nic Horton filling in for Brad Schmidt on the Schmidt Show. We're talking with State Senator Ben Gilmore, and he's going to stick around. We're going to dig into some more state issues. We might even talk a little bit more about the Olympics, but we'll be right back after this on KARN. We're back on the Schmidt Show. Hey, this national contest, if you want to go see Billy Joel and Sting live in Las Vegas, Senator Gilmore might want to enter this. The new keyword for this hour is young. 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 Just like it sounds.
Okay.
Text it to 95819, and you'll be entered in a chance to win a trip to Vegas.
How many times do you enter that?
That's not important. But I should remind you, standard messaging rates do apply. Don't text and drive. Oh, in Allegiant Stadium. That's a new Raiders stadium. Oh, very nice. Very fancy.
Look at that.
Maybe you can stay at Trump Hotel when you're there, maybe, if you want. Full rules available at NewsRadio1029.com. Hey, we're privileged to be joined in studio with Senator Ben Gilmore, State Senator
Great
Ben
to be
Gilmore,
here.
District 1. Tell us a little bit about your district down in L.A.
Man, what can I say? It's a great district down there. My district starts.
Good people.
I've been great people. Let me just be real. My district starts about 30 minutes south of Little Rock. Goes all the way.
Oh, really? That close?
Goes
Okay.
all the way to the Louisiana line. So we got a few gators, a little row crop, some timber.
Well, and for folks that don't know, I mean, the legislative districts are based on population, right? So
That's right.
your district geographically
It's one of the largest.
is really large because ain't a whole lot of people down there in L.A. Good people. Great
conservative
Great people.
Great conservative
but
people.
not as many. They're more spread out.
They're more spread out. They
More
like their
spread out,
space.
yeah.
Okay, let's just be real.
Hey, I'm with them on that.
I mean, your neighbors are too. They like to live
I don't.
yeah.
Well, I live in the county for a reason. We do have a couple text messages that have rolled in here during the break.
Awesome.
And I want to just get your thoughts because they're on topic with what we've been talking about. The first one here from an 870 number says, if we're a more conservative state, why can't our, quote, supermajority in the House and Senate seem to be able to pass good conservative legislation, and the vast majority of them are fighting closed primaries and keeping liberals posing as Republicans from running as Republicans? What are your thoughts, Senator?
Well, that's a lot of ground covered there, but let's start with the good conservative policy. I mean, I certainly appreciate the text and the person reaching out. I'd push back on that a little bit because I outlined in our first segment how much good conservative policy has been passed. I mean, let's just be really clear. We've been trying for, I don't know, Nick, how many years to pass universal education freedom?
A lot.
I mean,
15, 12. I mean,
and if you're concerned about indoctrination of children, if you're concerned about CRT, if you're concerned about all these things, agendas getting pushed from the liberal left in our schools, and you don't think that's good conservative policy, I really don't know what you think. And then let's just move forward into the PROTECT Act. The bill that I carried, proud to be the sponsor of, that got repeat violent offenders off our streets. You know who fought that? Not conservatives. The liberal left fought that. Okay, those are two bills. Let's talk about the tax cuts. We've already hit on that. We understand that lowering our overall tax burden is super important. But let's talk about the work that's been done in previous sessions about making sure that we guarantee the right to keep and bear arms. We are a constitutional carry state. That's a pretty big deal. I can just go on and on. I mean, not even talking about the entitlement reform bills that we've passed. I mentioned the one about the work requirements on those that are getting housing assistance. I mean, I can go on and on and on. And look, do we have more work to do? 100% we do. And the fight, look, let me just say this. We'll probably segue at some point into the Olympics. I hope so, because I'd love to give my thoughts on that. But let me just be really clear. What we're seeing continually from the other side is shifting of the goalpost. To use a sports analogy, it is the Olympics after all. That's going on. So let's talk about that. We're seeing a shifting of the goalpost. And so, we can't ever just sit back and rest on the work that we've done. We have to continually press forward and address these issues. And look, I'll just say this to answer the other part of that text. I think there's a lot of people who are for protecting the integrity of our elections and working toward getting us to close primaries. I don't think there's that many people against that. I think we have to be smart in how we address it, how we handle it, and making sure that everybody who is a Republican is a registered Republican. So let's just be really clear on that. And then look, and the other side of I think we've come a long way in our state, and we're a very big tent, and allowing a lot of people to come into our party, and that's great. So I think with that comes a lot of different ideas, and we're going to have a lot of viewpoints. But the bottom line is this, and one of the things that we saw at the RNC just a couple of weeks ago was unity and people banding together to say, you know what? We are going to win because our policies win with the American people, and we're going to band together to beat the Democrats this fall. And that's what we heard from President Trump at the convention.
You know, one of the most frustrating things, regardless of the issue of where we're at today in the country, but also here in Arkansas, is the loss of nuance, the loss of details in these debates. And I say that because in this case, exactly what we're talking about here, two things can be true at the same time. It can be true, as you articulated very well, and I totally agree with, that we have made significant progress, more progress in the last 2 years than in the history of the state of Arkansas, frankly.
Without a doubt.
In terms of conservative progress. It's not even close. But it can also be...
And real quick, that doesn't diminish the work that was done prior to. Let's just be really clear. I mean, I know people,
sure.
I know members, and you know them as well, who have been pushing for education freedom for decades.
Yes.
For decades.
Yes. Until
we finally got a governor that was willing to stand up and say, we're doing this, and a legislature that was willing to own it. But go ahead. Sorry.
And we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have gotten there finally without those folks blazing the trail before.
Without a doubt.
And chipping away and leading the way on the message of education freedom and why it was so good for the next generation of Arkansans. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But I guess my point is it doesn't have to be the case, and it's frankly not the case, that we've made no progress and there's more to do. In fact, two things can be true at once. We've made a ton of progress, but as you've articulated and we've talked about on this show, even today, before you got here, there is more to be done.
Without a doubt.
And that doesn't, those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Well, to assume the PROTECT Act is going to solve all of our criminal justice problems that we have in the state of Arkansas is intellectually dishonest. To assume that the LEARNS Act is going to solve all our problems as it relates to education freedom is intellectually dishonest. And look, here's what I want to go back. The person that sent that text in, I'm so glad they did, because what that tells me is we've got hungry Arkansans that really, really want to see even more conservative policy passed in the state. And that's huge, because I'll just tell you this, go back a decade, I don't know that we would have gotten texts like that. Go back to what I said about being elected with 60% in an area that said that they told me a Republican could not get elected in. I'm the first Republican since Reconstruction. That's called a mandate for conservatism. I've already said that.
That's a good point.
So let's just I recognize the frustration and that's not lost, but just know that we're going to continue to work to get that job done.
All right, we'll be right back on the Schmidt Show, 102.9 KARN News Radio. We're talking with State Senator Ben Gilmore. Stick around, we got more. We're back, the Schmidt Show with Nick and Ben. I'm sorry, Senator Gilmore. Nic Horton, Senator Gilmore from District 1. Turn your mic on here.
Don't you forget it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I didn't want to be interrupted.
Clearly.
You know, I want to get my intro in here.
I mean, if you didn't want me on the show
That's
to
right.
talk, you just tell me.
Host, guest host.
No, okay.
I mean, come on.
You know.
But yeah, we're back on the Schmidt Show and excited to be joined with Senator Gilmore for this 3 o'clock hour. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. I want to get your thoughts before we run out of time on the abortion amendment and what's going on there with all that insanity. But we did get another text during the break, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because I think this is for you. Texter says from a 501 number here, is there any way to kill the grocery tax? And I want to get your thoughts there because we were talking about tax reform in January, legislative session, what's coming up. What are your thoughts, grocery tax?
I think it raises a great point. We care about lowering the overall tax burden on Arkansans. So we've actually done a lot of work, even prior to my getting in the legislature, in lowering the grocery tax. The only grocery tax that's still in effect is in our Constitution, and that is the 1/8 cents conservation tax that goes partly to game and fish and to parks, heritage, and tourism. And I think there's one other, I can't remember exactly
Keep
what it
Arkansas
is.
beautiful.
Keep Arkansas beautiful.
Which
yeah.
we all
100%.
want.
We all want that.
Keep
And you know
Arkansas
what? We love our hunting and our fishing, and we want to make sure that we have the absolute best pristine hunting and fishing that we can have in the country, and we have that, and that's great. But at the end of the day, I have a real problem with levying a grocery tax so that we can continue to fund some of those programs. So, I think at some point that we ought to take a really hard look at that. But that is the only piece of the grocery tax still in effect is related to that, and it is in the Constitution. So that means it was voted on by the people. Let me be really clear here. There's a lot of things in our Constitution I don't necessarily agree with. Before everybody clutches their pearls and just like gasp for air, I'm talking about things like
the state constitution.
I'm talking about the state constitution. I'm talking about I don't know. We've got casinos written into the Constitution. Last time I checked, I don't think the founders were sitting around drafting the U.S. Constitution and thinking, "Hey, what about gambling? Let's put that in our Constitution. That's all right." So there's a lot of things that I just have concerns with that are in the Constitution. Grocery tax being one of those. So I think we ought to look at that.
Well, and we've been talking a lot about days gone by and how things
100%.
used to be. A lot of people forget, and I'm more than happy to remind them that former Governor Mike Beebe, I've often said on this show and others, if there was a Mount Rushmore of Arkansas liberals, Mike Beebe would be on it twice.
Yes.
And Mike Beebe ran his reelection campaign in 2006, was it?
Yeah.
No, that was his first race, so it would have been 2010.
Yes, 2010.
2010 ran his reelection on getting rid of the grocery tax. And I think he talked about it in his first campaign too, for that matter.
He did.
But he ran on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And we still have it. And so all this pearl clutching and kicking and screaming.
Well, in fairness, not quite 20 years ago.
Oh, well.
About 15, but yeah.
First election, 2006, yeah.
Okay, 2006, 18. Fair enough.
I don't do math good.
Clearly, I've noticed, but it's fine. But no, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot that we need to look at in reducing the overall tax burden. Talking about the Constitution, I think, is a great segue into talking about the abortion amendment, and let's just be really clear.
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts. There's a lot of moving information.
First of all,
about
let's
that.
just be really clear and be thankful that we have a good, solid Christian conservative like John Thurston sitting in the Secretary of State's office, who understands what it means to follow the law, whether or not the petitioners pushing that amendment understand what it means to follow the law, and are, as our governor referred to them, as immoral and incompetent. And thankfully, they were incompetent. They failed to submit the proper paperwork associated. Now they're challenging it, and the court's looking into it. I feel very confident that we will prevail. Our side will prevail, and I feel very confident in the work of Attorney General Tim Griffin in making sure that we are doing everything in our power to follow the law and therefore keep abortion out of the Constitution. So
we haven't talked about this yet today. Can you give like a 30-second? Or I can, but just a synopsis of what's going on with the abortion amendment. Like, the deadline was about a month ago.
Yeah,
but
so
it
they
was still kind of uncertain whether or not it's going to be on the ballot.
100%. So they claimed that they had 100,000 signatures. They needed just a little over 90,000 to make the ballot. So they turned in their signatures at the deadline, but they failed to turn in the appropriate paperwork with those signatures, which then made them ineligible to be on the ballot. Now, they have since sued, and they're going to take this to the courts, and they're working through that process. The court said, hey, look, we're just going to do a facial count, how many signatures they have. They came up short of that 90,000 number, even on the facial count of the signatures. So I feel very confident that they don't actually have the signatures they claim they have. They didn't follow the law that they were supposed to follow. And so I have the confidence that our court will do the appropriate and right thing and keep them off our ballot and therefore out of the Constitution. So that's where we're at this point, but that's why we have to be ever vigilant.
So basically, what happened is they submitted 100,000 roughly signatures. A bunch of them are invalid because they didn't submit the paperwork for the paid signatures.
Paid canvassers,
Secretary of State said, well, based on the volunteer signatures that you submitted, you're short. So they sued. They got a favorable ruling from the Supreme Court that said, well, go ahead and count them anyways. And then guess what? They were still short.
Well, yeah. So to be fair, it was count them, report back to us, and let us know were they even close. And it doesn't mean that they were actually going to rule in their favor, even if they had gotten to the 90,000.
Sure.
But I think the court's doing their due diligence, and that's fair. But yeah, to your point, they still didn't have enough signatures.
And so where we go from here, do we know kind of what a next step looks like at this point?
Yeah, I think there's a deadline for all the briefs to be submitted to the court by like August 9th. So we're about a week out. But again, I think it speaks for itself in the sense that they didn't follow the law.
What do people need to know about the substance? Like it's assumed. I don't think there's any way it gets on the ballot at this point. But let's say by some miracle, quote unquote, kind of a perversion of the term miracle, but by some stretch of the imagination, it ends up on the ballot. What do people need to know about the substance of what that amendment would do?
No, that's a great question. So here's the deal. Going back to conservative policy we've passed over the last several decades, one of those is on the issue of life, to make us the most pro-life state in the nation. I failed to mention that when I was sort of going through the litany of things that we've passed earlier. So we are the most pro-life state in the nation. This amendment, if it were to get on the ballot and pass and be in our Constitution, would wipe all of that out. And we would go back to, regardless of what the other side says, and they can spin their message and they can run with their narrative, and it's completely false and it's lies. But what it would actually do would allow for on-demand abortion up to birth. Pretty scary stuff, if you think about it. Pretty shocking, pretty disturbing. I don't know what other words I'm going to throw in there, but it's pretty cold-hearted to even say, look, you can kill a human baby up to birth, Nick. Like that's insane to me. I don't even know if there's countries, I mean, maybe there are, but like I don't know that Europe even allows that. And like we've seen the Olympics, so we know they're pretty trendy, huh? So like let's just be honest, like that's pretty progressive and not something we want in Arkansas.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. And of course they always come back and say, well, if you're so confident that people agree with you, why don't you want it on the ballot then, Ben? Why don't you want it on the ballot? Why don't you want it on the ballot, Nick? And the problem is, and we saw this with the Education Rights Amendment, which went down in flames, by the way.
Thanks to a lot of the great work by Opportunity Arkansas.
Well, I appreciate that. There were a lot of people that did a lot of educating on that. But we were faced with that question a lot during that so-called campaign over the summer to educate people about the amendment and what it would really do. And why do you want people to vote? If you're so confident in your ideas, why don't you want people to vote? And the problem is, which you just alluded to, is that if something gets on the ballot, people voting correctly, quote unquote, like voting the way that I think the majority of Arkansans believe and that they agree with, is dependent on them actually having the truth about what these measures would do.
Yeah. Well, let's be.
And that wasn't going to happen in either of these cases.
No,
because they were going to go out and say, well, it's just for exceptions. It's just for this. It's just for that. And they were going to lie to people.
They were going to lie.
And try to convince people to vote for this.
And they were going to spend a ton of money to spin that lie. And let's be really honest. Do you know how many of these like crazy leftist extremist liberals out in other states, billionaires who want to give money to causes they care about, do you know how much money they would have been willing to throw into a state like Arkansas that is the most pro-life state just to have that win under their belt?
Just to have that win.
Just to have that win.
Shove it in the face of the governor and all these other folks to say, look, haha, look what we did. Look at these dumb hicks in Arkansas like they always do. I have no doubt about that would have been their playbook. All right, we got to go to another break. We're talking with State Senator Ben Gilmore. Can you stick around for one more segment?
Sure.
Okay, we got a couple more things we want to cover. We've got a caller. If you can hang on through the break, we'll try to get you in. We're on KARN with State Senator Ben Gilmore from District 1. The Schmidt Show, Nic Horton filling in for Brad. We'll be right back. No, we're not back. Now we're back. We're back on the Schmidt Show. Senator Ben Gilmore in studio with Nic Horton, filling in for Brad Schmidt. Senator, I know you got to run.
Yeah,
we just got a couple minutes left, but there was something you wanted to say, and then we want to get Joanne here real quick.
I just wanted to be in studio so you could see my face, so I'm glad you got to enjoy that. But,
that's always a pleasure.
In our last segment, we were talking about the abortion amendment, and I actually got a text from a good conservative pro-life colleague, Senator Missy Irvin, who raised a point that I had neglected to mention. So I want to get it out there that ballot initiative, that amendment, had it made it to the Constitution, would have allowed for taxpayer-funded abortions. Pretty scary stuff. Pretty scary stuff.
Not good at all, and certainly not. Again, as we were saying in the last segment, not representative of Arkansas values.
Yeah, well,
really in any way.
Thanks to Senator Missy Irvin for bringing that.
My state senator.
Well, hey, there you go.
Thank you, Senator Irvin. All right, let's go to the phone lines real quick before Senator Gilmore has to get out. Joanne in Risen, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is it's a great day to be in Arkansas, don't you think?
Absolutely. Hey, that's every day.
Amen to that.
Yes, right. I wanted to just touch a little bit on this, the Olympics.
Yeah,
now,
please do.
I did not see it. Of course, sometimes being blind is a blessing, and I'm going to use this blessing this time because I didn't see it. But I've heard about it. Now, wasn't there some sort of a party at the White House where Jill Biden had invited a bunch of drag queens and they were dancing all about the place?
There was. I remember that, and of course they lit up the White House in the rainbow colors, and it's as a Christian, as a believer, it's really shocking to me that something like the rainbow gets perverted in the way that it is, Joanne. But no, thanks for calling in and saying that. But go ahead. I think I sort of cut you off.
Well, that's fine. But the thing is that Jill Biden she's there at the Olympics.
Oh,
wow.
That's right. Yeah, I saw that.
So I'm just wondering, not being with the conspiracy. I can't even say the word today. Conspiracy. There we go.
Conspiracy theorist.
That's it. Yeah. I believe it's so embarrassing.
It really is just
as a human being and as a Christian, and I'm glad I didn't see it, but then I wish I could have seen it because, well, just the thought of it is kind of making my stomach churn. But anyway, it made me feel like we were the ones being pointed at. We're kind of, we're seen as being weak and that sort of thing politically, and I don't know where I'm going with this.
No, I think you're
a Monday day for me.
Yeah, I think you're on track 100%. I mean, look, let's just be really honest. It was assault on our Christianity and the values that we hold dear, and a mockery of something that was very holy and very important to Christianity. And so I totally agree with you in that. I mean, it was pretty disturbing, pretty shocking. And, I think the worst part of that, I mean, all of it was bad, but the worst part of that were the children that were engaged in that whole depiction was pretty terrifying. Nick, I mean, you saw it.
There were children
involved. There were children in the actual scene as well.
I think you're very fortunate that you didn't have to see it, Joanne. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Count your blessings. And thank you for the call. Sorry it took us so long to get you in, but thank you for holding on and being part of the program today.
Yeah, great
Senator
to visit
Gilmore,
with you.
I know you got to run. Any parting thoughts for the good of the order before you head out?
Well, no, look, I would just say this. Thankfully, there's a lot going on in this world. We live in very challenging times, but in Arkansas, I'm really proud to say that we're doing a lot of great work. We're moving the needle for conservatism, for the values that we care a lot about. And so there's a lot of folks in our legislature who are fighting that fight. Our governor certainly is, and proud to be a part of that. So it's an honor to represent the people of Southeast Arkansas and Senate District 1. And Nick, thanks for having me on the show today.
Hey, thanks for coming by. Listen, this is one of the busiest guys in Little Rock, maybe in the state of Arkansas. I mean, maybe in the world, let's be honest. Very busy man. And we really appreciate you coming by and making time, taking an hour out of your busy schedule to be not only on the show, but in studio. It really means a lot, and I know folks back home appreciate it. And look, this is a guy who's got a lot of, I mean, you could tell. I don't have to convince you. If you're listening to the show and you heard even a piece of our interview, he knows a lot about what's going on in the Capitol. And I just have to echo so much of what he said. I mean, there's a lot of reason for optimism. And when you look at the world, you look at the country, we're not headed in a great direction overall. I mean, I know we all probably, if you're listening to this show, you agree with that. But Arkansas really does stand out. And we know that, right? As Arkansans, we know how special of a place this is to live and raise our families. I'm going to tell you more in the next hour about my organization, Opportunity Arkansas, and some of the things that we're doing to try to make Arkansas even better and an even better place to live. But what a contrast we have right now. Even though, as we said, there's more to be done. We've got more to do. We've got more progress to make. But look at half the rest of the country. I mean, you got this insane bill in California that was just signed by Governor Newsom. That, you know, I need to read it. I need to study it in more detail for myself before I go too far into the weeds. But from what I've gathered from the headlines and the commentary that I've seen about it, I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's going to keep parents in the dark about gender conversations and decisions that are made and being made by their kids at school. And if it's as radical as the headlines have suggested, again, I'm one of those, like, I go read the bill. There's a lot of bad information out there about a lot of legislation. So I haven't read the bill. But if what I've read is true, what a contrast to what is happening here in Arkansas, where we were one of the first states to say, no, actually, we're going to ban experimental transgender surgeries on our kids. We're going to protect our kids from mutilation. And we're going to cut the income tax. Coming in and being in studio. And we ran out of time to really tee this up or set this up for y'all, but we are going to spend some time this hour and in this first couple segments here talking with another dear friend of ours, Miss Laurie Lee from the Reform Alliance. We talked with Senator Gilmore a little bit about the Education Freedom Program and the significant progress that's been made in the last couple years, moving Arkansas from pretty much the bottom to now near the top in education reform. I would say in terms of reform, it's going to take a while for the rankings to catch up. But in terms of the changes that we're making and the steps that we're taking, we're now a national leader, if not the national leader, on education reform. And Senator Gilmore mentioned that there were a lot of folks who had blazed the trail and laid the groundwork for what happened last year in the legislative session to get us to this point. And one of those people is Laurie Lee. So, Laurie, are you with us? Thank you for joining. Think we're on mute. Hold on. How about now?
I'm here.
You get a second chance. Laurie, how are you? Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I love being on and sharing the win and what Arkansas is doing for our teachers and our students and our families. It's amazing what's happening in our state right now.
It really is a pretty. I mean, we were talking about this with Senator Gilmore. I can't think of a more exciting time to be a conservative in Arkansas. And you've been doing this a little bit longer than I have. What do you think?
It's an amazing time to be in the education reform movement. I've been doing education reform in Arkansas about 25 years. And, we had little programs along the way here and there, some charter school things. We had the Succeed Scholarship. We had a small tax credit program. But it just took the right leadership and a governor with a vision for our kids and somebody who understood what it was like to have children who didn't necessarily all fit in the square box, that our families needed some options. So, it's fantastic.
So one of those big pieces of the education reform package, the LEARNS Act, was this idea of education freedom, and specifically education freedom accounts. So I want to talk more about LEARNS broadly as we go, but I know there's something really important happening right now with the Education Freedom Program. So what do folks need to know?
So the portal has opened back up. So applications are now being accepted again. We had a room for about, I think it was 14,000 applications, and we got 12. And so they closed the portal for a little while just to make sure that, the numbers were right and everything was going the way that they anticipated. They did change vendors because Arkansas has an RFP process, and so we had to go through that. And all of that, everything is done and moving forward. And so today, or midnight last night, the new portal opened back up. So if you are interested in applying for an EFA for your child, K-12, and you fall in one of the criteria, which I can list off here really quick, you can get up to nearly $7,000 to help pay for tuition and fees, uniforms, technologies, therapies. There's a list. You can homeschool, you can microschool. You can do all kinds of things with these dollars. It really is, from my vantage point, the desire of the administration to give parents as much freedom as they can have, as long as they're using it in good faith to make sure their kids are educated. So if your kid is a child that has a disability as identified by IDEA, is a current or former foster care child, is homeless, if you are a military family on active duty, if you're a military reservist, if you're a military veteran, if you're a first responder or law enforcement officer, if your child lives in a D or F school district, and there's a list of those, or as you well know about this one, Nick, if your child's a first-time kindergartner, you guys are eligible to apply for the EFAs, up to nearly $7,000 for a myriad of educational usage, including private school tuition.
Awesome. So we're talking with Laurie Lee of the Reform Alliance. She's been doing education work in Arkansas for a very, very long time and helped lay a lot of the groundwork for where we are here today. So, Laurie, you mentioned some of those criteria. So if folks want to learn more or want to figure out how they can enroll, what's the easiest way? What's the best place for them to go to answer more questions or even start the application process for the EFA program?
So they can go to the Department of Education. As you well know, some government websites are hard to navigate. You're welcome to call our office in Little Rock and get an answer there. You can email us at thereformalliance.org. If you're trying to contact us, it's very easy. We just changed our phone number. So our phone number is 501-244-9028. You can call that. You can call my cell phone at 501-244-9028. 258-6353, or you can email us at info@thereformalliance.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. If you can't get a hold of us, you're not trying. But we're more than willing to answer phone calls, answer questions, help people fill out applications, decide if they're also eligible. The LEARNS Act provided for the Philanthropic Investment in Arkansas Kids Scholarship, which is a income-only based scholarship for families that earn 200% of the poverty level or below. And those two scholarships can be stacked if you are income eligible for the PAC and your child is a child with disabilities. A lot of our schools that focus on educating children with disabilities are costly, as those parents well know, sometimes in the tens of thousands of dollars annually. And so you can get nearly $14,000 that you can spend on tuition and fees to attend our best private schools that focus on SPED children in the state of Arkansas. So if you have questions about any of those things, please give our office a call, 244-9028, area code 501. We're in Little Rock. Or you can call me, email, any of those things.
So we're talking with Laurie Lee of the Reform Alliance. She's giving you all of her contact information. They're on all the socials. They've got email, phone numbers. Reach out if you have questions. But in the meantime, Laurie's going to stick around for, I think, at least one more segment. And if you have questions right now, call in 501-403-5276 or text 501-403-5276. And we'll give Laurie your question and give her a chance to respond. Listen, if you're a parent of school-age kids and you're frustrated with the options that you've had and you think you're stuck where you are, you might be for now because there are certain criteria for this. But next year, this program going into 2025 school year is going to be fully universal, and every child in Arkansas is going to be eligible for this program, regardless of means, regardless of zip code. Every child is going to have a chance to participate in this. So I would say start doing your homework now, even if you don't think you're eligible. Start doing your research. Call Laurie. Go to our website. Get the information to put your kids in the best position that they need to be to succeed in life. We got to go to weather or traffic. I'm sorry. Is that right, Tom? Okay. We got to go to traffic on the 6s. We'll be right back on KARN. 102.9 KARN, the Schmidt Show. Nic Horton filling in for Brad Schmidt. Hey, before I forget, if you want to win, Laurie, you may want to enter a free trip. Is it all? What's included, Tom? Round trip air for 2 nights hotel, the Trump Hotel, maybe, we don't know. 2 tickets to Allegiant Stadium to see Billy Joel and Sting in Las Vegas in November. So the keyword to text to 95819 is young. Like I used to be. Yeah, used to be. YOUNG, young, for your chance to see Billy Joel and Sting live in Las Vegas. Standard text messaging rates may apply. Don't text and drive. Full rules available at NewsRadio1029.com. I can't talk fast anymore. I used to be able to, but Laurie's back. Laurie, we're talking with Laurie Lee, the Reform Alliance. Thanks so much for sticking around. And we're going to keep her around for the rest of the hour. I think she's got time. We're going to keep talking about the Education Freedom Program. If you have questions, text, call in 501-403-5276. Laurie, we've only got a couple minutes before we got to go back to traffic here. But I want to get your thoughts. I know you got a town hall coming up. Tell folks a little bit about that.
So on August 6th, that's Tuesday, August 6th at 7 p.m., we will have the Department of Education on a town hall, and people will be able to get questions answered, ask questions, get absolutely factual information. As you well know, there's a whole lot of information out there, but a lot of it is misleading and not accurate.
Not much good information out there.
Go to the source document if you've got questions. And if you don't know where that is, you can call me on my cell phone. I'll be more than happy to share with you where that is. I can even refer you to the law itself, to the rules, to the website from ADE. But don't believe all that you hear out there. Make sure you're doing your due diligence and not being spoon-fed your news. Go straight to the source.
Yeah, we're talking with Laurie Lee. She's given out her cell phone number, but I just want everybody to know she's a married woman now. So don't be calling, texting Laurie Lee late at night, okay? You'll be in big trouble if you do that, believe me.
Right.
We're going to go to a quick break, get in some traffic and weather real quick, and we'll be right back on KARN. And we're back on the Schmidt Show. Nic Horton filling in for Brad, talking to Laurie Lee of the Reform Alliance, and we're talking about the biggest thing happening in Arkansas, the biggest conservative victory in the history of the state of Arkansas, education freedom. Laurie, you were talking about a town hall meeting. Why don't you just give that information one more time for folks that might just be tuning in? If they want to learn more, they want to participate in this town hall meeting that y'all are hosting next week, where do they go to sign up?
They can go to our Facebook page, our Twitter, or our website. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Tuesday, August 6th. It'll last about an hour. You will be able to ask questions in the chat, and we will have the Department of Education on the line to answer those questions and get any concerns that you may have with the program and actually give out accurate information on what's really happening with the program. This is fabulous. Not only does this allow children to access educational opportunities that best fit their needs, it also saves the state millions of dollars starting this school year because we're only spending half of what we would typically on each student. Those funds are going to, sometimes be turned back. I think that's where they're getting a lot of this money to fund the teacher salaries. As you well know, our teachers are the number one paid teachers in America right now, given the cost of living in Arkansas. Number 4 or 5, I think, if you just, do it across the board. But things are really happening in Arkansas for the better. And the only people that are really upset about it, as you know, Nicholas, is the union. And that's because they are not getting, the power and money from all those butts being in the seats at the traditional public school, which we advocate for that too. I mean, if your child goes to a traditional public school and is thriving, that's what school choice is all about. School choice includes traditional public school. So if your family's succeeding there, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No, amen. I'm just amening over here.
Yeah, then great for you. If they're not, then you should have an option. And right now, and before Learns, before Learns took over, the only people that really had those options were the more wealthy, more affluent families in our state. And so school choice affords the most vulnerable students, as you can tell by the criteria that you have to have to be eligible for one of these. Well, you've got children with that are special needs kids, foster kids, homeless kids, kids that are in DNF districts. I mean, who's going to argue that those are not the most vulnerable families in our state? And so
totally
it's very disingenuous when they're talking about, it's only for the rich. Let me give you a news flash. The rich have always had school choice.
Welcome back to the Schmidt Show. Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Brad. Excited, honored, flattered to be back in the hot seat. And we've been talking with Laurie Lee from the Reform Alliance. We had a little bit of a mix-up, some technical issues here, so we lost her. But if she's able to call back, we'll get her back in because we do have a handful of text messages, questions that have come in for her. In the meantime, I will tell you, go to their website, thereformalliance.org, thereformalliance.org. They have some tremendous information. And really, look, if you have more questions about, do you qualify for the EFA program? What can the funds be used on? Really top to bottom, they've got a lot of great information and resources there. And you can go to their contact page, go to About Us, and then Contact. And look, these folks are on top of it. I mean, I've known Laurie. Gosh, she doesn't like me telling how long I've known her, but because it's a long time. And it ages both of us, okay? Let's just say that. But known her for a very long time, consider her to be a very, very dear friend. And these folks are on top of it. You send a contact, you send an email or an information request, an inquiry to them at thereformalliance.org, and they're going to be on it. like a chicken on a June bug, to quote my dad. That is how quick they're going to get back to you. I send folks to them all today. Even had a friend reach out. Hey, I've got some questions. Want to see if we can get enrolled. Hey, call Laurie, call her team, call the Reform Alliance. They're going to be able to answer your questions. And what I love about them, aside from really deeply caring and just understanding the history of education reform and the importance of a good education here in Arkansas, they're not just me out here like running my mouth and just like talking about education reform. They're actually doing the work every single day because they're working with teachers and administrators and parents and kids and the Department of Education, and they're helping navigate this new landscape, this great new education landscape. And there's a lot of unknowns, right? Like there's some unknowns about, again, I mean, the LEARNS Act, the EFA program for this year is very different than the one from last year. There's a lot more kids that qualify, which is a good thing. There's a lot of different criteria now that kids can qualify based on. And next year it's going to be different again. And hopefully that'll be the last change. After next year, if there's another change, it only means we went backwards. It's only because we went backwards. Because as of next school year, August 2025, the 2025 school year, every child in Arkansas, regardless of income, regardless of zip code, regardless of who you are, where you're from, or what you look like, or what you sound like, you can qualify for an Education Freedom account. And Laurie was saying there before we got cut off at one of the last breaks, we've always had school choice and Education Freedom in Arkansas, but it was just for the rich kids, right? It was just for the people that could afford. Because if you're rich and you don't like the district that you live in, one of two things happen. Well, I guess one of three things. You pick up and move to a better school district, or you pull your kids out of their public school and you put them in a school that is a private school that, is likely fairly expensive, or you just leave them where they are, stuck, which is the worst of all three options. But the point is, if you were, quote, well off or, quote, rich in Arkansas, you had education freedom before. You always have. You've had the ability to go wherever you want. And that's fine, good for those kids, good for those families. But not every Arkansas child had that. And now they do. As of next school year, every child in Arkansas will have that choice. And by the way, it's not just private school. It's not just charter school. It can be homeschool. It can be micro school. It can be going to a different public school. These funds, by the way, can even be kept and used towards college. Like if a kid doesn't use all their funding through grade school, they can save some of the funding and use it for an advanced degree. Or a degree, I should say. It's pretty cool. A lot of people don't realize that about this program. There's a lot of things people don't realize. And there's a lot of things that people, let's be honest, are intentionally not telling you or mistelling you. But that's why I thought it was really important to have Laurie on. And again, if you want to learn more about the Education Freedom Program, you can go to the Reform Alliance, thereformalliance.org. Oh, and by the way, I haven't really got to talk much today about Opportunity Arkansas, my organization. But we've put up a little splash page, a little website of our own called empowerourparents.com. And we're not trying to duplicate or really replicate exactly what Laurie's team is doing. If anything, we're trying to complement their work. But this is a place where just on one page, in about 90 seconds, you can scroll through here And you can get pretty much most of the basic information that you need about the EFA program. You can find out who's eligible. You can see the schools in your area that are participating that you can enroll your kids in. There's a link right there, by the way, if you want to know where you can sign up. One of the first links on this page, sign up here. And that will take you directly to the Department of Education, the Arkansas Department of Education website where you can enroll your kids in this program. And you'll get about $6,800 back that you can use to pay for your own kids' education in the way and the place that you think is best for them. We've got some FAQs here, just kind of basic questions. You can sign up for our email list if you want, and we'll keep you in the loop with new developments about the program. But a lot of good information here at empowerarparents.com, empowerarparents.com. As Laurie mentioned, the enrollment for the program just reopened yesterday at midnight. So there's still time to sign up in advance of the 2024 and 2025 school year. And I would say, look, if your kid's in a school that's not meeting their unique needs and you need more options, this is worth a look. And it's maybe not for everyone. We have some great public schools in Arkansas. But we have some doozies too. And if you're in one of those doozy districts and your kids need more options, this is something you really need to take a look at. That's why it's there. We're going to get some weather and traffic on KRN. Nic Horton filling in for Brad. We'll be right back. 102.9 KRN News Radio, the Brad Schmidt Show. Nic Horton filling in. We got a couple text messages here. One from Tate in Jacksonville. He says, I was able to drive my kids to Cabot schools while living in Jacksonville back in 2017, and they called it school choice. The only issue is there's a limited amount that can do it before overloading the school district. I think that's a really important point because you hear this, from the other side, the naysayers of private school choice or private education freedom, or what I would call just universal education freedom, which means you can go to any school that you want. And they kind of spin this around on you and they say, well, it all sounds nice, but private schools, they can turn away anyone that they want. Well, guess what? So can public schools. If you have 1,000 new kids move into a school district, in a school district that's suited for 500, they can't take all those kids. It's just not possible. Public schools have limited space and resources, just like private schools do. But they put this narrative out there that well, it sounds nice, but actually, and I can't tell you the number of people that have told me that private school choice is actually cruel. It's cruel. It's cruel, Nick. It's just cruel. Because you're telling families they get this thing, but they don't really get it. Because the school can just throw them out. It's just cruel. They don't have to accept them. Well, number one, private schools want students in general. That in some ways is inherent in being a private school. You only get to survive as a business model, for lack of a better term, if you have students. And I went to a private school. It's not a secret. For a couple years at the end of my high school, I was homeschooled for about halfway through and then went to a private school. And, when you're a kid, you're not privileged to everything that's happening behind the scenes, but there were a lot of new kids coming in our school from all over the county, from neighboring counties. I remember kids driving in from, I was in Searcy, and I remember kids driving in from McCrory, Augusta, very rural parts of Arkansas, well outside of White County where the school was, because their parents knew that they were going to get a good education there and that they wanted them to get that education. And they were willing to drive and sacrifice and pay the tuition and the cost for the uniforms and everything else that's associated with that. But my point is, there weren't just like lines of people being just turned away from this private school. And that there's a lot of myths out there about private schools, about school choice. But that's got to be one of the bigger ones. It's so frustrating. Well, it's cruel because they're all these kids are just going to apply, and then they're just going to get the door slammed in their face. I mean, I'm sure there's anecdotal examples of kids being rejected for admission at private schools, but the idea that that's somehow the norm, it's just crazy. It's just made up. Like half this nonsense. Quick weather and traffic. We'll be back, KRN. All right, the end of hour 3. Wow, time really does fly, Tom, when you're having fun. When you're on the Schmidt Show, doesn't even feel like work. Tell you what, and you got a producer like Tom, just makes it so easy. But we're having a lot of fun. Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Brad. Phone lines are open if you want to be a part of the show. Call or text 501-403-5276, 501-403-5276. And we'll get you in the next hour. We don't have any more guests lined up, so it's me and you. Free Speech Tuesday, if you want to be a part of the show. Call in, text. I've certainly got some things. There's certainly plenty of content. Don't worry. There'll be plenty of things to talk about. I haven't said everything I want to say. And some things I probably shouldn't say about the Olympics. The opening ceremony specifically. There's some new developments with the abortion amendment we can talk about as well in the next hour. Always happy to talk about tax reform, education, freedom, some of the things we've touched on already here today. But we'll get to that and much more in the next hour. Remind you, if you want to learn more about the EFA program, the Education Freedom Program, if you're a school-age parent, I would just encourage you to at least take a look. And it may not be right for you, and that's okay. There's no obligation here, but I would encourage you to take a look. Go to empowerarparents.com, empowerarparents.com, or the reformalliance.org, and learn more about the EFA program. See if it's right for you and your family and your kids. And we've got 1 hour left. We really just feel like we're just getting warmed up. A lot more fun to be had on the Schmidt Show with Nic Horton. We'll be back. Hour number 4, the Schmidt Show with Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for the great Brad Schmidt, KARN. Hey, we've gotten several text messages, and they're all about taxes, and they're all about different taxes, which I love. I mean, I hate taxes, but I love the topic of like discussing which tax should we get rid of first, and how can we reform this one, and how can we cut this one a little bit. So I'm going to just hammer through several of these because I think they're all great topics and they're all great questions. So maybe we'll just do a tax reform, tax cut hour here for hour 4 on the Schmidt Show. I'm going to go back to one that we talked a little bit about with Senator Gilmore, and we covered this briefly then, but I think it's worth revisiting. From a listener with a 501 number from Benton that says, is there any way to kill the grocery tax? Now, the short answer to that is yes. We just have to have the will to do it. Senator Gilmore mentioned it is in the state constitution. Unfortunately, it was approved by the voters, I think in the mid-90s, late 90s. I'd have to go back and look. But, yeah, it needs to go away. I mean, food is pretty essential, right? I think we can all agree. And it's way too high, as Tom says, way too high It's funny. I've been seeing these stories. It's really not funny. It's horrific. But folks going into like their online shopping accounts and recreating the exact same grocery orders that they made a year ago or 2 years ago and looking at the price variation of what it was then versus what it is now. In some cases, I've seen double, more than double. $6 for milk. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And so we've been at Opportunity Arkansas. We've been talking about the grocery tax for a couple years now. Arkansas is actually one of the only states left that still has a grocery tax. And what's funny is to go through this list, you're going to find like that's a pretty common theme for some of these taxes, like the franchise tax, the soda tax. Like a lot of these taxes that Arkansas has, we're one of the only states that still has it or has it at all. We're one of the highest tax states in the country. And we've, again, had this conversation in the 3 o'clock hour with Senator Gilmore. Credit where credit is due. We've made a lot of good progress, particularly on income tax. And by and large, I think that's where we should keep our focus. We're down to 3.9. We started out at 7%. I think it's very possible that by the end of the legislative session, like by this time next year, we'll be at 3.5 or lower, which means we'll be more than halfway towards eliminating our state income tax, which is a huge deal, huge deal. And so I don't think, my message has been, and I think it's going to continue to be, we shouldn't take our eyes off of that or focus off of that too much. We got to prioritize a little bit. And part of that prioritization has to be, where's the momentum? Where's the political will and where's the momentum? For better or for worse, I mean, we can gripe and complain and we can all have our own particular ideas about which taxes we want to go away first, but the bottom line is, and I'm a bottom line guy, the bottom line is the momentum is behind income tax. And frankly, it should be, because it's immoral. I'll just say it. It's immoral. The fact that we punish people for earning a living. We punish people for doing better and earning a paycheck. It's wrong. And in the same way, going back to the grocery tax here, I think punishing people for trying to feed their family, for buying food, I don't think things that are essential like that should be taxed. And certainly you can make a really strong argument that tax hurts low-income Arkansans more than it does other Arkansans. And when you look at the cost of groceries over the last couple years, a lot of that's being driven at the federal level. There's not a lot that the state can do, but there are some things, and the grocery tax is one of them. So fully support getting rid of that, and I predict you're going to see a pretty decent push on that in the legislative session. I'll just say that for now. We got another text from 870 number. Speaking on taxes, what about property tax and used car sales tax? My opinion, both are unconstitutional. Great question. I can't necessarily speak to the constitutionality. I mean, I understand the argument that they're alluding to there. I try to be pretty cautious about, declaring something constitutional or unconstitutional. I mean, those words have certain meaning, and unless something is explicitly, disallowed or approved by the Constitution, I mean, or a court has ruled, and even in that case, sometimes it's not a perfect test. But point being, I don't know if they're unconstitutional or not, but I certainly am in favor of significantly reforming both of those, the property tax and the used car sales tax. We have seen, though, again, we've seen some progress on both of those. in the recent June special session that happened before, since I've been here last, they did, I think, double the homestead tax credit, which is the tax credit for homeowners and property tax. So that's moving in the right direction, which I think is certainly positive. Used car sales tax, we've made some progress on that too. Again, I'd like to see more progress. We've advocated Opportunity Arkansas for getting rid of it entirely. I think, again, it falls in that category of punishing low-income Arkansans more. And so many of us have had this experience where you buy a car and you scrape together $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 in cash. You sell an old car, sell some other junk to save up and scrap together some money. And then you go down to the DMV to pay for your tags. And they say, okay, thanks for that. That'll be $600. And that's not $600 for like the license plate or the registration fee. It's sales tax. Now, don't quote me on those exact numbers. Those numbers have changed a little bit. But it's a significant amount of money. It's a significant outlay of cash. And I'm telling you, I'm not at that same point in my life right now, but I've been at a point in my life, as many of you have, where I had to scrape together and figure out how to buy a car for cash for $3,000 or $4,000, and then went to get it registered, and I didn't have the money. I didn't have the money to pay for the sales tax. Had to borrow money to pay sales tax on a vehicle, by the way, that had already been taxed probably 25 times. So I think it's totally wrong, and I would love to see it go away. There's been a push to do that in some recent legislative sessions. Again, where's the momentum? It's not really there. It's more for the income tax. I think once we get rid of the income tax, everything's on the table. And I'm not suggesting we have to wait until the income tax is fully gone, but there's some calculations here. Not only politically, but just mathematical calculations about where does that revenue go? Where does it have to be taken from? General revenue versus special revenue. There's a lot of calculations there. And the text line is blowing up right now. We've got a caller as well, so stick around. We're going to get in some weather and traffic, and we're going to keep talking about tax reform. KARN. Welcome back to the Schmidt Show. Nic Horton filling in for Brad Schmidt. We're talking about tax reform. So far, I think we've talked about income tax, grocery tax, property tax, used car sales tax, and we barely even scratched the surface because there's so many freaking taxes in Arkansas. And I've got 6 or 7 more text messages here from folks who want to talk about their least favorite tax, or I should say their favorite tax to hate. But before we do that, we got just a couple minutes. I want to get James from Hot Springs Village. He's been waiting patiently. James, what's on your mind?
Man, I'm gonna touch on, because I got disconnected when you were talking about the vouchers, and I'm gonna channel right into your taxes, because I think the solution to a lot of the issues that we have can all be solved cumulatively through the same series of actions, right? We've got the voucher system, and you've got people that complain against it. You got a governor that came in and gave the first significant raise to an educator in 2 generations, and they hate her for it. There are literally people in poverty that would never been afforded the opportunity to go to somewhere that wasn't a failing school district had these changes not started. Now, they either will work or they won't. But we are dead-gum near the bottom in education when measured against the entire country.
That's right.
And we need to start thinking a little outside of the box to cure that and stop crucifying those that are trying to correct the course of a failing system. And I would tell you locally, and this is where how I channel into the tax situation, if you really want to make a difference in Arkansas and the next generation, you want to really leave a true legacy, it's time to start holding teachers, principals, superintendents, school boards, mayors, local congressmen, your state representatives, and then your federal representatives accountable, like you hold your local high school football coach, like you hold the football coach on the hill, responsible, where you call for the head every 5 years, and then you don't stop calling for their head until they're gone and replaced with somebody you perceive as more competent to lead a football team. This is your children we're talking about. This is your money we are talking about. This is your liberty, not a football team. Maybe we give it the same amount of priority in our life. And we start there. We start holding them accountable at the voting booth. You don't have to be crass. You don't have to be ugly. You don't have to get in their face on Sunday morning after church.
That's right.
You just have to make your voice heard through your vote. And if that's not getting it done, you need to grow a spine and run for local office. That's how the change begins, with somebody with a little bit of character and a little bit of vision and a whole lot of passion for Arkansans. That's how it changes, not by bitching about it on the radio, excuse my language. But, man, I do appreciate your time. The tax part of it, we're used to paying income taxes. You start doing away with income taxes, and you will see use taxes go up, and that's how legislation stalls and becomes an unelectable topic, right? Because we got to draw the money from somewhere. So there's got to be a balance between our use tax and our, just owning property and earning income. There's got to be some kind of balance in there. There's no way to just axe all of it and then not take a little bit of it from somewhere else when you have a state of 3 million impoverished people compared to Texas or even Alabama. Like you just don't have the wealth differential in this state that can carry the burden of a complete use tax. And as a libertarian, I am a use tax individual. I think most tax is theft. However, I do want a police department. I do want a National Guard. I do want some civic services, right? Yeah. I'm not a cold-hearted individual. I want the poor to be taken care of when they can't mentally or physically take care of themselves, right? Jesus Christ is Lord, and we should act that way in all aspects of our life, even in our government and taxation. So I'm willing to give to Caesar. But at this point, Caesar has brought in 6 million other Caesars to start stabbing in the pot. And it's time to start cutting federal government at its knees. But again, that won't happen until you start holding your local family circle accountable first. So,
James, I really appreciate the call.
I appreciate you letting me get after it, man.
Hey,
have a good one.
Listen, I think we're going to let you host next time. Really appreciate the call. A lot of good comments.
I'm down anytime. You got my number. Holler at.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for calling. We're going to have to go to a break. I want to respond to some of what James had to say on the tax side. I mean, I hear where he's coming from, but I think when you look at the numbers, it doesn't quite bear out. We're not going to have to raise taxes if we get rid of our income tax. That's a choice. Just like having an income tax is a choice. We'll be back on KARN. Welcome back. 1029 KARN, The Schmidt Show. Nic Horton of Opportunity, Arkansas, filling in for Brad. Appreciate James in that call. Woo! Got me fired up. I hate that we had to cut it short because I wanted to have a little exchange with him, and I really appreciate the call, and I respect a lot of what he had to say, particularly on education reform. Some really good comments there. I think where I diverge with him a little bit is on the topic of tax reform, because, look, we don't have to We don't have to raise taxes to lower taxes. And all due respect to James, I mean, that is a talking point of the left. James didn't sound like a leftist to me. I'm not insinuating that. But that's their mantra. That's their narrative, right? Well, okay, you can cut taxes, but we really need to raise taxes over here. We really need to increase spending over here, which is the same thing effectively as a tax increase. And yeah, we're okay with taxes for, tax cuts for, quote, the middle class, but we need to raise taxes on the rich. Or we need to raise capital gains, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. Why don't we just spend less money? And also, by the way, I mean, it's actually more nuanced than that. We don't have to just spend less money. Because the story of Arkansas tax reform that we're seeing play out right now before our very eyes and ears is that every time we've cut income taxes, revenue's gone up. We've actually had more money come in every time we cut income taxes. Why? Well, because free market economics is actually a thing that actually works. Like, it's not just something Ronald Reagan came up with in the 80s. Like, it actually works. If you let people keep more of their money, then they will spend more of their money. If you let businesses keep more of their money, they will hire more people and spend more money. And all of that money still trickles into state government in various ways through payroll taxes and sales taxes. More jobs means more people paying more income taxes in many cases. More jobs and more businesses operating in Arkansas means more corporate income tax revenue. And that's what we've seen. And so the idea that if we get rid of the state income tax, the sky's going to fall and we're going to have to make up for it somewhere else and we're going to have to find that revenue somewhere else, I just don't think it's true. And again, I don't think James was being misleading. I just think it's more complicated than what was being suggested. We don't have to raise taxes on something else in order to just lower, in order to lower income tax. We haven't done that so far. And we've got all these, we got a lot of texters and folks commenting about the need for property tax reform, which I agree with. We do need that. But we've done even some of that. And we've reduced spending. Or I should say, let me rephrase. We've reduced the increase in state spending. Typically, state spending goes up about 3 to 5% per year. This year, it went up about 1.5%. That's a huge move in the right direction. Now, we need to, again, we talked about this with Senator Gilmore. We got to keep the momentum going. And at some point, we might need to pick up the pace a little bit even. But it doesn't mean that good change isn't happening. We've got Ken on the line from Cabot. Ken, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, taxes on my mind, on my wallet.
They're everywhere, brother.
Especially when it comes to schools, which are a part of the property tax. And, it's really a rigged game until they get all these bond issues and special elections done at the same time as a general election instead of, I don't know, it's like on the third Tuesday after a blue moon or something, they have the school bond measures and school board elections. And you turn up to these things, and the only people you see are people with school ID badges on in there to vote. In a county or a school district, you'll have
we've all seen
600 people turn out. And it's terrible, and it's rigged because of not having it at a time when people turn out. Not that people shouldn't care enough to turn out, but sometimes you got to help the hapless. It's just it needs to be some reform to get the school tax and bond measures, because they say, oh, we're not going to increase it, we're just going to carry it on. Well, you know what? Until you start retiring debt instead of building more things, which require more maintenance, you're not helping yourself. You're
That's
just
right.
building a little empire.
Well, I have good news on part of that, which is that we did make some significant progress on special election reform last year, and there was a bill that we worked on a lot at Opportunity Arkansas, and Representative David Ray carried, that is going to force those tax and bond issues to be held at regularly scheduled elections. The other half of that, though, with the school board elections, I think that's still a huge problem, and still something that I totally agree. We've got to get that fixed. It's not fair to the voters. It's not fair to the people that are paying these taxes that these school boards are supposed to be representing, but the elections are not held in a transparent way. So I totally agree with that.
And I'll be continuing with my pressure on my local representatives, state and Senate, to get this done. But people need to raise a stink about it instead of just not showing up, because they're spending your money like drunken sailors.
Well, I think that's really important. I think a lot of times, and Ken, thanks for the call. I think we lose sight of how important it is to engage with our local officials. I should have, if we'd had time, I would have probably got into this with Senator Gilmore earlier. But a phone call or two can make a really big difference at the local level. At the federal level, maybe not. They get so many calls and texts and emails and everything else. But at the local level, the state legislature level, it can make a tremendous difference. So, Ken, good for you. I think keep those phone calls going and letting your elected officials know how you want them to represent you. I mean, that's the beauty of this country and the state that we live in, that you get a chance to voice those concerns. And I think you're really onto something. It's a really big problem with these school boards that, they have their elections effectively in the dark of night, and voters don't get a fair shake, frankly, and a fair chance to show up and make their voices heard. We also don't have term limits for school boards, which I think is a problem. You've got folks who stay in there for 15, 20, 30 years. And you think about how much the world has changed in 15 years, in 10 years, in the last 6 months. I mean, the world has changed pretty significantly. And you've got folks in there who just have been in there way too long. So there's definitely some reform needed. We got to get in some weather and some traffic. We'll be back. KARN. That's what I'm talking about. Johnny Cash Tuesday. I love it. Brad Schmidt Show. The Schmidt Show. Nic Horton filling in for Brad. 102.9 KARN. We've been having a lot of fun talking about my least favorite subject, tax reform. Let me rephrase that. My least favorite subject, taxes, and one of my favorite subjects, tax reform. I hate to keep harping on this, but, we had James from Hot Springs Village call in. Great call. Made some great points. But you're going to hear me probably every time I'm on this show or this station continue to push back on this idea that in order to get rid of the state income tax, we're going to have to raise taxes somewhere else. It's just not true. And that's not a criticism of him. And look, James is far from the first person that I've heard say that. I hear it almost every time I talk about this issue. At an event, on the radio, the legislature. Well, that's fine. It's all well and good, Nick. But, you do that, we're going to have to make it up somewhere else. That's just how it works. And I just don't understand that mentality. I mean, I know where it's coming from. I know where the narrative is coming from the naysayers and the people who just want to keep doing things the way we've always done them. But it's a choice. It's a choice, just like having an income tax is a choice. And if we choose to get rid of it, which I hope we will, and we're on our way to doing that, slowly but surely, really quickly but surely, we don't have to raise taxes somewhere else. We can if we want to, but who wants to? I mean, I don't think most people do. And that's what's really funny. And not applying this to James, but a lot of people, that's actually what they want. A lot of these naysayers and these lobbyists and these special interest groups at the Capitol, they'd be more than fine with raising some of those other taxes. And that's the dirty little secret of some of this. But they also know that if they keep pushing that narrative, it's going to scare legislators away from wanting to continue to chip away at income tax. And that's why they're doing it. So I just think we can't fall into that trap. We got to go to a quick weather and traffic. Stick around, couple more minutes on KARN. All right, we got to wrap it up. Just a few more minutes here on the Schmidt Show. But look, when it comes to the topic of income tax, again, I'm going to keep beating this drum and beating this narrative back because it's a choice. And it's a choice that we don't have to make. And by the way, if someone filed a bill, if the income tax goes away, and I think it will within the next 8 to 10 years, and then somebody decides to file a bill to raise your sales tax or raise your property tax, it ain't going to go anywhere. I mean, not in this legislature, not in this legislative environment. I know that's somewhere out in the future, but I don't foresee Arkansas getting any more liberal or any less conservative anytime soon. I'm still getting texts, get rid of the property tax. Someone says, let's talk about, and another text, let's talk about immoral taxes, perpetual property taxes. That's extortion. If it's not paid, men with guns will come take my land. I don't disagree. And I'll tell you, I've been thinking about this a lot. Where I'd like to get is to a place where we have no personal income tax and we have an age out or a phase out of the property tax. So 58, 60, at some point you phase out and then you don't have to pay it anymore. And, you know, we'll still have some consumption taxes and some excise taxes and some of these other things probably forever. But think about that. Think if we had no personal income tax and you phased out of the property tax with places in Arkansas like Hot Springs and Hot Springs Village and Bella Vista and these gorgeous, attractive places that we have for retirees to come. We could become a magnet, and we should be. There's no reason we shouldn't be. Arkansas is the best place to live on earth, if you ask me. We just got to start acting like it again. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, go to opportunityarkansas.org. It's been a blast. I can't believe it's been 4 hours. Thanks, Brad, for having me on.